when citizens pay their full share of taxes, they take more than a passing interest in how they are governed and in how public funds are utilized and accounted for. The point here is this, that a taxpayer is less tolerant of corruption than a citizen who does not pay tax. Because most of what the government spends is from oil, and the taxes are very few. Many citizens simply see government money as belonging to no one.
How do we try and change the culture? Number one, in a society where people believe that they provide their own water, provide their own security, some even go as far as saying, I even paved the road in front of my house. And so they say they provide their own infrastructure. Well, if you did pave the road or you leveled the road in front of your house, you did it for your own personal benefit and convenience. When you pay tax, you don't pay it only for your own personal convenience or benefit. You pay tax for the benefit and convenience of everyone within that society.
Fireworks there from the 20th Annual Tax Conference. Yes, the 20th Annual Tax Conference, organized by the Chartered Institute of Taxation of Nigeria, has come and gone, but the impact continues to resonate across the land. Whatever you have seen or heard so far on the 20th Annual Tax Conference is nothing compared to what you are about to get on tax matters, beginning from this episode. My name is Olumuyiwa Matuluko. Welcome to Tax Matters. It was 3 days of high-octane activities, beginning with the hospitality night held in the evening of Tuesday, the 8th of May, to welcome participants. At the hospitality night, various district societies of the CITN and other groupings, including the Society for Women in Taxation, made presentations.
Argument. Right from the source, they deduct my tax for my salary.
You have indeed encouraged me the more. You have shown me that a good turn deserves another.
No go support you. Pension and no go receive any money. You no pay us. And you want us to vote for you. No.
At the end of it all, the Lagos District Society emerged winners. Tax men and women do have fun. The morning after, fully refreshed and raring to go, participants drawn from all corners of Nigeria, including participants from Ghana and Burkina Faso, gathered for an intellectual feast. The opening ceremony was performed by the Vice President of Nigeria, His Excellency Professor Yemi Osinbajo, Grand Commander of Nigeria.
The conference this year has the theme institutionalizing the tax-paying culture in a developing economy. Today, Nigeria is going through a quiet revolution in taxation sector, and I'm delighted that our respected institute is at the vanguard of this and is providing, among others, the intellectual ammunition required to propel and sustain the injection of the revolution.
Intellectual ammunition, yes. Still on the theme of the 20th Annual Tax Conference, President CITN, Chief Cyril Ede, linked the theme of the conference to the ongoing Voluntary Assets and Income Declaration Scheme recently extended till the 30th of June 2018 by President Muhammadu Buhari. Vice President Professor Yemi Osinbajo, who was special guest of honor at the opening ceremony, fired from all sides like a good soldier, an intellectual soldier. After recalling the phenomenal achievements recorded by the various regional governments of Nigeria pre-independence from Britain in 1960 and post-independence up to the advent of military rule in 1966, Professor Osinbajo reminded his audience about the sources of funding for the giant strides recorded by the regional governments.
Whatever they managed to achieve was largely on the back of taxation. But with military rule from 1966 and oil money, everyone forgot about taxes. The federal government gave everyone an allocation. Without federal allocation, most states cannot survive. I'm sure you're familiar with the statistic that Lagos State alone takes in as much IGR as 31 states combined. It tells you how little the other states manage to bring in IGR. That our tax to GDP ratio is one of the lowest in the world would in fact really surprise no one. As of May 2017, of the roughly 70 million Nigerians who are economically active, only 14 million, or 20%, paid any federal or state taxes at all. The number of Nigerians who pay more than 10 million naira in self-assessed taxes is even more astonishing. As of December 2017, only 943, that is 943, not 8,000, not up to 1,000, 943 Nigerians pay self-assessed taxes of over 10 million naira. Of that number, 941 live in Lagos State. The other 2 live in Ogun State. I think you ought to look at the gentleman sitting next to you, that millionaire sitting next to you, and ask, have you managed to pay taxes, self-assessed taxes? It's a favorite of those who love the chicken and egg argument. Which should come first, paying taxes or enjoying the dividends of good governance? In reality, we shouldn't have to debate this at all. Tax compliance and good governance should exist side by side as the head and tail of the social contract that binds or should bind citizens and governments anywhere in the world. It's of course not hard to explain the cynicism that Nigerians display about governance and about fulfilling their tax responsibilities. Governments generally have been nonchalant about fulfilling their own part of the social contract. But it's also a fact that when people pay taxes, they are more inclined to hold their governments to account. When citizens pay their full share of taxes, they take more than a passing interest in how they are governed and in how public funds are utilized and accounted for. However, the story seems to have changed, and we've mentioned this, as we began to rely more and more on oil revenues and less on taxation. This period, of course, also coincided with military rule and took away from the people their choice of leaders. With increasing oil wealth, government soon lost the will to tax. And the decline of taxation also signaled a decline in government's accountability and ability to deal with the needs of the people. For too long, Nigeria has carried on essentially as an oil-rich country, one without need for its citizens' taxes. The unwritten compact has been something along the lines of pay whatever taxes you can, but it's really no big deal. In exchange, we as government get the right to do whatever we like with Nigeria's oil wealth. This arrangement has, of course, fueled the massive corruption and the inefficiencies that have come to be associated with public revenue management. The point here is this, that a taxpayer is less tolerant of corruption than a citizen who does not pay tax. Because most of what the government spends is from oil, and the taxes are very few. Many citizens simply see government money as belonging to no one. So you sometimes hear people even openly supporting persons of their ethnic group or persons who share the same faith with them who steal government funds. Whereas they would not tolerate the same persons stealing from their town union funds or any society to which they belong. The simple reason is that they are active contributors to whatever societies they belong, and they will not tolerate anyone stealing their money. Last year, we launched the Voluntary Assets and Incomes Declaration Scheme, VADES. VADES has opened up a 12-month amnesty window, which allows Nigerians at home and abroad to regularize their tax status by declaring and paying all taxes previously undeclared over incomes and assets and all that, without the fear of investigation or prosecution. One of the VADE's goals is to raise Nigeria's tax to GDP from the current 6% to 15% by 2020. When VADES comes to a close on June 30th, 2018, the tax authorities have made it clear that they will aggressively go after all tax defaulters and evaders. And I'm sure will require the active participation of all of you tax administrators and tax professionals present here. In terms of tax administration, we are seeing new levels of cooperation between the federal and state authorities. VADES is a very good example of this, based on the realization that cooperation will bring more benefit than competition. On the international level, we've signed a number of international tax administration agreements that will make it harder for Nigerians to evade taxes by hiding their assets abroad. We're also working on how to adapt our tax laws to the digital age, one in which commerce has become borderless and intangible, and to which the old laws no longer really apply. E-filing is a rapidly growing concept which we are very keen to extend to taxpayers at all levels across the country. We are also taking seriously measures to curtail tax evasion by multinational companies. I know that this is one of those issues that the Minister of Finance in particular is very passionate about. We must not hold the ordinary citizen to account for tax payments while allowing the powerful multinationals to capitalize on their size and smarts to slip away without scrutiny. We're also determined to ensure that no one is left at the mercy of unfair tax regimes. To this end, we've extended the reach of our double taxation avoidance agreements. There's no doubt that much has been achieved, by the unprecedented push to rewrite the tax narrative in Nigeria, to ensure that everyone, citizens, businesses, investors, tax professionals, governments, all derive maximum benefit from the system. Earlier, I noted that as of May 2017, only 14 million economically active Nigerians paid taxes. I'm pleased to note that the number is now in excess of 19 million and still growing. This means that the efforts led by the Federal Inland Revenue Service, in collaboration with many of the state's inland revenue services, have already added more than 5 million new taxpayers to the tax base. So while thanking you for your attention, it is now my special privilege to declare this 20th conference open. Thank you.
Remember, the Voluntary Assets and Income Declaration Scheme now runs till the 30th of June 2018. Go out there and file today.
London, New York or Lagos, business or holiday, home or office, you can now carry out your tax transactions from anywhere in the world. You can now file all your tax returns, pay online, get a receipt and even process your tax clearance certificate from anywhere in the world online and in real time. All you need to do is log on to www.firs.gov.ng and click on e-services and be introduced to the world of innovation, convenience and transparency from the FIRS. You can also pay stamp duty as you register a new company with the CAC or for other transactions that require stamp duty payment online. You can also file your withholding tax returns and determine the withholding tax deducted from you is in government coffers so that you can get your receipt within 45 days as long as the deduction has been remitted. Yes, all of this and more online at www.firs.gov.ng/e-services. FIRS, making tax administration as easy as ABC. Please note that all FIRS services are free of charge. This message is from the Federal Inland Revenue Service. It pays to pay your tax.
Opening formalities done with, the intellectual feast began in earnest with the very first paper of the technical session on the theme of the conference delivered by the Executive Chairman, Federal Inland Revenue Service, Mr. Babatunde Fowler. The paper presentation session was chaired by the immediate past president of the CITN, Professor Mrs. Teju Shomoni.
When we're looking at the entrenchment of a culture of paying tax, that implies that it should be voluntary, that on our own we should be able to come forward and pay what is due to government. In the FIRS, we had a system where we introduced self-assessment. And when we decided that we will check on the self-assessment done, both for multinationals and also for local companies. Out of the first 200 national audits that we did, not one was compliant. So the question is, can we presently rely on self-assessment? And the answer is no. And why is the answer no? Because there's that culture that is not there. Some people will tell you that it's because there are no consequences. That is why people decide not to be truthful. If the words, I'll choose my words very carefully, but we're all professionals here, and we all have to play a role. And the question is that some of our members here, President, act as tax consultants, advisors to corporate Nigeria. What role do you play? I have a slide here that shows the average tax to GDP. The OECD countries on an average is 34%. Brazil, 12.8%. South Africa, about 27%. India, which is said to be, in quotes, a developing poor nation, is 16%. But I think the Vice President clearly spoke about the need and the case for Nigeria. The United Nations, the IMF, OECD, and the World Bank had a meeting at the UN in February of this year. And from all their information, they said any country whose tax revenue to GDP is below 15% is not likely to be able to fund sustainable and economic development. Nigeria certainly falls in that category at 6%. We looked at our figures for last year. There's an improvement. I'm sure maybe we're now between 8 to 9%, but we're waiting for that confirmation. But that was still not where we're supposed to be. But like the Vice President said, 2020, we're looking at 15%. But I think that if we join hands together and do what we can do, we should be able to do 20% in 1919. And I think that's the challenge for you and I here.
Mr. Fowler's seminal paper was discussed by no other person than a former executive chairman of the FIRS and former Accountant General of Nigeria, Mr. J.K. Nayeju.
The paper presenter has really dealt extensively on the area that borders on the, I call it psychology or the human aspect of the taxpayer's behavior. Sanctions, he emphasized, is one of them. And making appeal is one of them. But this appeal has to be backed up by some penalties and sanctions for not doing. Because behavior-wise, a lot of people don't like to pay tax.
And from the audience,
I will want to encourage FIRS as well as states' internal revenue services to ensure that the job of taxation is mostly handled by tax practitioners and not tax contractors. Thank you.
Tax, they say, is by representation, which suggests that every tax is by statute. Let me particularize. The issue of withholding tax has always been something that has been agitating and bothering my mind. We all know withholding tax is an advanced tax. Or in other words, the money you deposit to be utilized after your assessment. So it's not yet tax until valid assessment is raised. Why do we need to apply to enjoy that? Since it's our money kept with the authority, do we need to write an application to have access to our fund?
Don't we think it's a bit of an irony that it is now when businesses are struggling, we're in what is more or less a depressed economy, businesses are finding it so difficult to survive, that the government is harping on taxation more than ever before.
Mr. Fowler responded.
Let me take the question of the withholding tax credit notes. You're very correct, sir. the money is yours. And that's why we now have technology, so you can even be sure that when it's deducted within 45 days, you have access to it. And I said in my presentation that we have even have on our system withholding tax payments from 2012 to date, so that if you want to file your returns, you'll be able to download all your withholding tax certificates and file your returns, and of course deduct that amount that is yours. And if you have, based on your withholding tax revenue, you have a refund, apply for a refund. So all that will be done very seamlessly. The issue of why the government is looking for tax revenue. First of all, we have to be mindful. You only pay tax when you make profit or earn an income. So for businesses that are still growing, where they're not really making money, then there's no tax. But I also mentioned the first 200 national audits that we did, none were compliant. So our focus is on those healthy businesses that are generating income that are not paying tax. Our focus is on those organizations, enterprises, etc., partnerships that are taking your VAT and not remitting it. Our focus is on that sector that is still benefiting from the Nigerian economy. The other comment in terms of the businessmen who have become tax consultants. We certainly do agree with you, sir, and we have written to the CITN, and of course we have to give a lead time, and we have said effective January 2019, we will not accept any tax returns prepared by a non-member of CITN. So that basically is our stand. But we thought that we had to give enough time for it to be made public and for people to adjust. If you want to do a self-return, you're free to do that. But if any consultant will act on your behalf, that person, that organization has to be a member of CITN.
Another technical paper was presented on the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan, ERGP, and the Voluntary Assets and Income Declaration Scheme, followed by a panel session on restructuring, taxing rights, and fiscal federalism, the way forward. On Thursday, the intellectual feast continued with another technical session on transfer pricing and global tax trends, base erosion and profit shifting implementation, and the journey so far. Thereafter, breakout sessions followed on various burning issues. The 20th edition of the annual tax conference was rounded off on the night of Friday, the 11th of May, with a gala night, at which once again taxmen and women showed that they can actually have fun. Highlights of the evening of glitz and glamour included the announcement and presentation of awards to winning tertiary institutions in the now annual CITN tax quiz competition. Awards were also presented to men and women who have contributed in great measure to the development of the taxation sector and the CITN, as well as winners of various competitions held during the 3-day conference. We dedicate our own award to you, our teaming viewers at home. Thank you for your support. Tax Matters spoke to some delegates to the conference as well as officials of the CITN on their impressions of the 20th Annual Tax Conference.
It's a huge success, and the large turnout was awesome. You know, in spite of our preparations, we were still awed by the number of tax professionals that turned out for the program.
It's a great success.
And from the CITN president, what is the message of the CITN, as represented by you as president, to the government?
We have told the government, and we're going to tell the government, that it is time to review our tax laws, that it is time to make people sit up and fulfill their obligations to the government and to Nigerians. It is time for people to realize that the tax has become an occasion for the moment, and people should know that paying tax is not a punishment, but rather it is a fulfillment of obligation and the fulfillment of our own civic responsibility.
You can trust us that we'll bring you fuller details of the various paper presentation sessions, the panel sessions, and the syndicate sessions in subsequent episodes of Tax Matters. Have a beautiful week ahead.